Hey, my name is Mike Klein, Senior Pastor here at Mountain View Church, and I'm just really grateful that you're taking a few minutes out of your life to learn more about this place. The reality is, no matter where you're at in your life, whatever age, whatever stage you find yourself in, I think Mountain View is the kind of place that you can belong, where you can find real people who are trying to discover a real God and are just at various stages in their life taking steps towards Him. So feel free to check it out a little more. Look around the website, contact the office if you want any more questions. But really the best way to get plugged in and the best way to experience what this place is all about and why so many of us have chosen Mountain View as our spiritual home is to come and just check it out for yourself. So we hope to see you soon.
In Psalm chapter 7 and verse 10, it says, God, your wraparound presence is my protection and my defense. You bring victory to all who reach out for you. In Psalm chapter 22, it says that the Lord is enthroned on the praises of His people. And in Hebrews, it says that we can come boldly to His throne of grace. So this morning, let's just set aside every distraction and let's just focus on Jesus. This morning, let's just build Him a throne that's worthy of His glory with our praises. Let's enter into His presence with thanksgiving.
I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. I raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me.
I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm, louder and louder. You're gonna hear my praises roar. Oh, up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive.
thank you so much for this time to gather in your name and to bring you praise. Lord, would you prepare our hearts and prepare our minds? Draw us to your word and to the word that is brought from you through Pastor Mike today. We love you so much. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's service. If you're new to Mountain View, welcome. We are so glad you chose to join us. We want you to know we are praying for you and we are here for you. To stay up to date with the latest announcements, please visit us on our website at mtviewchurch.net. There you will find links to request help or prayer during the COVID-19 quarantine, or you can request information about ways to help people in our community during this time. You can also find links for online giving and our previous sermon podcasts. And make sure to stay connected with us throughout the week on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. We will have content throughout the week to help you grow in your relationship with God and remain in community with others. As we get ready for the sermon, you can find notes and links for this week's service on the YouVersion Bible app. Just go to the More icon on the bottom right in the app, click on Events, and search for Mountain View Church to follow along with the sermon.
Well, welcome back if you're a regular part of the fellowship at Mountain View Church, and I would like to just say welcome home if this is the first time that you've joined us. We're so glad that you're tuning in today. Before we dive into today's teaching, I want to make just a couple of quick announcements that I'm really excited about. The first one of those is wherever you're watching, we would love to just get to know you a little bit better and just say hi and know that you're tuning in so that we can hopefully build some kind of connection with you. And so there's two ways that you can let us know you're watching. One, if you are a regular part of our church, we have what's called the Church Center app. And if you download that app and you could select our church, if you're close to here, it's going to find it by your location. Otherwise, you can just type it in and find it. But you can use that Church Center app to check yourself and your whole family into this service that you're watching right now. It is actually the same kind of program that we use to check kids in on Sunday mornings here in our building, except now you can do it for your whole family. And so download the Church Center app, check that out. But if you're newer around here, maybe this is your first time or you're still just kind of checking things out, what would probably be more helpful to you is the online Connect card. And so there's a link in the comments below, whether you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube. If you click on there, you can find out a little bit more about our church. You can request prayer for something. There's all kinds of stuff on there. So check that out if you would. And we just want to connect with you. We just want to know you're out there and hopefully get to know you a little bit better. The second thing I want to announce and want to let you know about is next Sunday is actually Mother's Day. So I guess the first part of that announcement is, guys, next Sunday's Mother's Day. Okay? This is your warning. I just want to let you know that. But we want to do something special for all the moms of Mountain View. And so we are actually putting together a video tribute. You can go to this website that we've set up, and you can record a quick, 10, 15, 20-second video of what makes your mom so awesome and what you love about her. There's a couple questions you can answer. And then we're going to compile those videos, and if you'll come back next Sunday during this same hour, the same service, we are going to play that for all the moms out there. So check that out. And then moms, I already talked to the men. Let me talk to the moms for a minute. Normally on Mother's Day, we make a pretty big deal about you at the church, right? We love to celebrate you on Sunday morning. That's a little bit different this year, right? But we haven't forgotten you. And so what I want to tell you is you're going to want to make sure that you have liked and followed our Facebook page if you haven't already. You may even want to hit that little setting where you can see our church's post first thing when you open up the app, because we're going to have a little something on there for you moms this week. And I think you're going to want to be there, okay? So make sure you're plugged in on there and you're ready to go. All right, enough with the announcements. We are in week 2 of a series we're calling Now or Never. Right, Now or Never. And the basic idea of this series is that you and I tend to live like we're going to live forever. It's okay to admit that. I do it. You do it. Most of us live that way. It's just hard for us, for whatever reason, to think much past tomorrow or even next week or even a year from now. But if we could, right, if we could slow down long enough to think about the essence of time and the truth of what's said in Psalm 39, we're going to look at it here in a second, then I think that would change how you and I spend our time. I think it would change our view of the hours that we've been given. And so this was the main passage from last week in Psalm 39. It says, Lord, remind me how brief my time on earth will be. Remind me that my days are numbered, how fleeting my life is. You have made my life no longer than the width of my hand. My entire lifetime is just a moment to you. At best, each of us is but a breath. I'm curious if any time during this week, if you had an opportunity to grab a tape measure and do that little illustration that we talked about last week. I'd probably never look at a tape measure the same way again after that. I had a few of you send me messages and talk about that. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, make sure you go back and watch last week. But that tape measure was just that visual reminder to us that, like, oh yeah, like my days really are numbered. I don't know what the number is exactly. None of us do. But there is a countdown happening. There will be a day in which my number is called and my number runs out. And what matters to me on that day should matter today. Right? What matters to me at the end of my life should shape what matters to me right now. And that was kind of the whole big idea of last week. But that left us with some questions, right? In fact, it leaves us with more questions than answers, I would say. And so we asked 3 big questions to kind of get us thinking and get us down the right track. The first question was, what really matters to me? The second question, what really matters to God? And then the third question is, what percentage of my time do I actually spend on those 2 things? And really what these questions are trying to help us determine is whether or not you and I are people of integrity. Now you might hear that and think, really? Like integrity? That's pretty harsh. How can you tell if I'm a person of integrity based on just a few questions about how I spend my time? Well, it depends on how you define integrity. Right? If integrity is just about like, well, I do a lot of good things and I'm a pretty morally upright person and, you know, I feel like I'm, you know, a good person, then that's one thing, but that's really not what integrity means. Right? If I had to define integrity, I would say that integrity is when what we say we value lines up with how we actually live. Right? What we say matches up with how we live. That is being a person of integrity. It's not about what you just say you care about and what you say matters most to you in the whole world. This thing is so important to me. It's so important to me. It's more about whether you actually live that out in a consistent, everyday way. That's what having integrity means. So let me just switch gears a little bit because I think this might help us answer a lot of those big questions that we asked. I want to talk about what must have really mattered to Jesus, right? Because one of the questions is what really matters to God. And the best way to answer what matters to God is to look at the person and the life of Jesus. Colossians actually makes this huge statement. Colossians says that Jesus is the visible image of the invisible God. Right? He is he is God in the flesh. And so when we look at Jesus and we see what matters to Jesus, we're looking and we're seeing what mattered to God. And if you're his follower, I would contend what should matter to you as well. So what really matters to Jesus? And I want to look at several Bible passages kind of rapid fire here in a row. So maybe you want to just write out these references and check out these stories with your a little bit later. But in Matthew chapter 9, verses 35 and 36, it says, Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then a little bit later in Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 and 14, Jesus is basically trying to catch his breath. He's tired, and he's actually just found out that John the Baptist, his cousin, has been murdered. And so Jesus is trying to sneak away for a little alone time to just kind of process all of that and to be alone with the Father. But it says when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. But hearing of this, right, hearing where Jesus was, it says the crowds followed him on foot from all the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had, here's the word again, compassion on them and healed their sick. Next passage, Matthew chapter 20. It says, as Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. 2 blind men were sitting by the road, and when they heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted to him, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. The crowd, right, everyone else watching, the crowd rebuked them, told them to be quiet. But they shouted all the louder, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. Jesus stopped and called to them. What do you want me to do for you? He asked. Lord, they answered, we want our sight. And Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes, and immediately they received their sight and followed him. Now, I could find more. I could keep going on and on with stories like this, but I think you're probably getting the idea. What really mattered to Jesus? People, right? Other people, specifically hurting and desperate people. Jesus filled the hours of his life showing compassion to others. That's the word you see repeated over and over in the story, and I could have showed you more, but over and over it just talks about how Jesus saw people, saw the situation that they were in, and then had compassion on them. And it wasn't like some program, right? This is what I want you to understand. It wasn't like some big initiative, that his neighborhood watch had started. It wasn't like some big church vision project that he had signed up for. It was just how Jesus spent his days. It was just a part of who he was, that wherever he was, whatever he was doing, his eyes were attuned to see hurting people. Showing compassion was just the purpose that animated his everyday life. So I wonder if you look back on this last week, or we said last week that you get 168 hours every week, right? That's how many we get. If you look back on the last 168 hours, and you had to summarize your week with one word, what would it be? For Jesus, I think that word would be compassion. Maybe it would be others. I'm curious what your word would be. What was the overall purpose of the hours that you had? Maybe a better way to do this, I would say this is a scarier way, would be to ask someone else who watched your week what they would say was the theme. That might actually give us a more honest assessment, probably. Because I know how this works. I've been in church long enough. Many of you have as well. If I was asked to list my big priorities in life, we all know the answers, right? We know what we're supposed to say. You got the little triangle diagram. You know that the most important thing in your life, the thing that's supposed to matter most to you of all, is supposed to be your relationship with God, right, and your faith. And then underneath that would come your family, your spouse, your kids, those kinds of things. And then maybe your job or your friends, depending on kind of how you feel about that. And on down the line, you would list your priorities because we know that that's what should matter to us. But you know what never lies? You know what always tells the truth? Your calendar. Your calendar tells the truth. If you want to know what someone really values, you don't have to listen to what they say. You just have to look at how they spend their time. Like a lot of us would probably say that one thing that we really value, one thing that really matters to us is having meaningful relationships. And I think I would say that. I'm guessing you watching this, I'm guessing you would say something similar. That when it comes down to it, that when I get to the end of my life and I look back, that what's really going to matter in my life is not going to be my job. It's not going to be how much money I made or the awards I won or any of that kind of stuff. What's really going to matter to me at the end of my life are the people closest to me. That I had meaningful, deep friendships and relationships with others. And yet when we look at our calendars, those same friendships aren't given as much priority as we say. And they kind of get shoved in there whenever we have some free time. Right? I want you to think about that phrase for a second. Think about free time. Right? Like all the rest of our time is really costly and really valuable to us. But if we have anything left over, if we just got a little bit of like free time over here, then we'll give that to what we say really matters. Relationships. That doesn't make sense. In fact, a lot of us would admit that many of our relationships are more shallow than we would hope for, that we'd like deeper relationships than we have. And I think one of the reasons that shallow relationships are so common today is because we believe we have an unlimited amount of tomorrows. It's why we so often connect with someone in a conversation and say, yeah, we should get together. Yeah, we should totally do that. Yeah, someday let's do that. Someday let's get the kids together. Because we believe that we have an unlimited amount of days. But we don't. In fact, if we really understood how short our lives were, if we could actually see the eternal clock ticking, I think that we would devote way more time to relationships than we do. But let me go back to Jesus for a second. It's always a good thing for a preacher to do, to just, talk about Jesus. Let's just go back to Jesus. Maybe you're watching this, and if you looked at your calendar and you just had a moment of honesty, you would just say, I don't really know what my theme is. Like, it just feels like a bunch of random stuff that I do or that I feel like I have to do. Maybe you feel like your hours lack any sense of real purpose. Right? There's no theme. They're just scattered. They're just random things. I think a lot of us feel that way. I know I certainly have felt that way at times. I think a lot of us are desperate for some kind of unifying theme for our lives. What if you followed Jesus' lead on this? Or if you say, I don't really know what the theme of my life is supposed to be, what if you just adopted Jesus's? Right, what if regardless of your job title or your family makeup or personality traits, what if every single one of us, including me, lived out our days looking for ways to show compassion to others? Listen to what Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 has to say on this. It says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. I love the imagery of this verse, this idea of being clothed with these things. It's like, hey, Mike, when you get up in the morning and you get dressed, like make sure before you leave the house that you put on this wardrobe, right, of these things like compassion and kindness. That way, like wherever you go, whoever you encounter, you're dressed for success. You are ready to show compassion to others. You are ready to be Jesus to those whom you encounter. And again, I want to make sure that we're clear on this. It wasn't like showing compassion was some big program that Jesus signed up for. It was just who he was. It was just what he did as he went about his day. It wasn't a thing he had to stick into his day. It's just the thing that animated his life as he lived it. I heard another pastor put it this way. If you're wondering, like, well, what is compassion? How do I do that? The pastor said that compassion is when you connect what you can give to what someone else needs. Right? When you can connect what you have available, what you can give to what someone else needs. That's really all there is to it. And that could look like so many different things. Often in the church world, we talk about three really big areas of resources that all of us have at our disposal. And that's our time, our talents, and our treasures. Right? Our time, our talents, and our treasures. And so just to kind of give you some examples of what this could look like, maybe what you have to give someone is your time. Right? Maybe showing compassion to someone is simply giving them your presence for a few minutes and giving them a listening ear or a word of encouragement or just simply being with them. We actually had something happen today where someone called into the office, and what they really needed in that moment was someone who was able to drive that could go and pick them up and take them to a doctor's appointment at Salem Clinic and then just kind of wait there until their appointment was over and bring them back. And so we started calling people who had signed up to help, and we found somebody that was willing to do that was willing to make a sacrifice of their time, right? They could have used that for other things, I'm sure, but they had the time, and they chose to sacrifice it in order to meet this other person's need. That's compassion. It's compassion in action. Or talents, right? How can you use your talents to show compassion? Well, some of us are gifted at things that other people aren't. Right? Right now, some of you are making and sewing masks for people all over the county. People like me who, if I tried to attempt to sew my own mask, would probably end up with my hands sewn together. Right? I just have no ability to do that whatsoever. But some of you do, and so you're putting that to work. And many of you are even giving these away in this time for people who need them. That's using your talent and showing compassion to others. And then lastly, our treasure. Right, our finances, our money. I received word earlier this week that our food bank here in town that's at the Pentecostal church here in Almsville was, feeling a lot of pressure, to be honest. As you can imagine during this time, there's more people than ever that actually need food and need their services, but they've actually had to reduce down to 1 day a week. Number one, to not expose their volunteers too much, but also because they're just running out of food. They can't keep up with demand. And one of the things that's happened is because of this virus, they're no longer allowed to accept outside food donations. It has to be all bought. And a lot of it comes from the food share, but then after that, the directors have to personally just buy it. They can be the only ones that handle the food. And so I began to think about that. And I mean, I've talked about this in the last few weeks, but God has been so faithful to provide for our church, really for years, but even in these last couple of months when a lot of churches are reporting, reduced giving and all this stuff, you guys have been so faithful and God has so blessed us. And I thought, okay, what do we have that could meet the food bank's need? We have money. We have money mostly because of you. And so earlier this week, we were able to write a $1,000 check and just go down to the food bank with that and say, here, take this and buy what you need so that you can continue to provide hope to hungry people. Right? Compassion is taking what you have and matching it up with what someone needs. And so here's my challenge to you. I want to challenge you this week to get out a calendar. For some of us, that's a phone. Maybe it's something that's on your fridge or on your desk at work, wherever it is. I want you to look at your calendar, and I want you to audit your hours. I want you to just write down all the hours you spend doing whatever it is that you do. And there's going to be some huge chunks in there, right? You have to sleep, you have to eat, you have to work. Someone's got to take care of your kids, so make sure that stuff's got to be on there, right? I get that. I'm not saying you should feel bad if you spend time doing those things. Those are necessary. But audit your hours, and then I want you to just ask yourself the question, does my calendar reflect what I say matters? Right? Is there integrity between what I say I really care about and how I spend my time? Maybe it does, right? Maybe you're going to do that, and you're going to be more encouraged by that. You're going to be like, wow, I'm doing this really well, and that's awesome. Maybe some of us look at that and it doesn't line up. And so you're going to feel the Holy Spirit's nudge to maybe move a few things or delete some stuff or to add some stuff. And maybe you'll find a way, like Jesus, to infuse what really matters into every hour of life that God has given you. That's the trick. It's not so much about sliding something more on your calendar. It's about how do I infuse what I say matters most and what matters most to God into the hours that I'm already living. Let me pray for us. God, I think almost all of us would admit that there are times in our lives where we just really struggle to get this right. Where what we know we should care about, what we know is the right answer for what really matters, and then how we actually spend our time and what we actually do in our lives don't necessarily line up. And I'm just convicted about that in my own life this week. Areas that I know aren't quite in line with your priorities. And so first of all, God, I would just ask by your Spirit, would you reveal those priorities? Would you reveal those things to us that should matter more than they do to us right now? And then secondly, God, would you help us to rearrange our hours to reflect those? And maybe to find some sort of theme. In fact, maybe even right now, you would give us a word. God, I pray we would just be listening to your voice. Maybe you would just give us a word, like for Jesus, that word seemed to be compassion. Maybe you would give us a word that would just help us to create a theme across the hours you've given us so that everything is infused with what matters most to you. And we pray this in your Son's name. Amen.